Let me read to you a passage from the 18th chapter of St. Matthew's Gospel, verses 3 to 12. It's the Gospel for Friday after the 19th Sunday in Ordinary Time. St. Matthew writes, "Some Pharisees approached him and tested him, saying, 'Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any cause whatever?' He said in reply, 'Have you not read that from the beginning the Creator made them male and female, and said, For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother, and be joined to his wife, and the two become one flesh? So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, no human being must separate.' They said to him, 'Then why did Moses command that the man give the woman a bill of divorce and dismiss her?' He said to them, 'Because of the hardness of your hearts, Moses allowed you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. I say to you, whoever divorces his wife, unless the marriage is unlawful, and marries another, commits adultery.'" That's from Matthew chapter 19, verse 3 to 12. We are led to think of absolute values on hearing that passage. You know, on countless occasions in history, civil legislation has attacked absolute values. The constant threat has been to substitute absolute value for usefulness and convenience. In mid-August of 2006, the Australian media gave plenty of attention to the Australian Prime Minister's announcement that the members of the coalition federal government would be given a conscience vote on the use of embryonic stem cells for research purposes. The lines were immediately drawn, and there were many in the federal parliament who were determined that legislation would be passed legalising these procedures. The reason they gave for their position was that embryonic stem cells offer excellent material for therapeutic treatment of diseases. Of little importance for them was the fact that all the evidence already pointed, and since confirmed, to adult stem cells offering the best potential for medical treatment. Furthermore, and far more critically, embryonic stem cells were taken from the live human embryo. It therefore involved damaging, harming, and destroying human embryos for the benefit of medical research and human therapy. Human embryos at their most defenceless stage were to be surgically attacked and plundered for their live parts, to be used for the advantage and happiness of others. This legislation would allow human embryos to be artificially created for use in experimentation, involving a philosophy of rank utilitarianism and a disregard of the absolute value of each human being. As well as this, at that time, there were up to perhaps 100,000 abortions performed annually. Looming on the horizon at the time was what was called the abortion pill. It can be difficult for many to understand the evil of deliberate sin. How is it that a person could be damned eternally who dies in the state of unrepentant and deliberate mortal sin? Let us think of this. God holds each person continually in existence. Let us remember the infinite holiness of God and of his consequent horror for sin. This same all-holy God sustains the sinner in existence while he, the creature, is sinning in the most awful manner. Consider God's consequent proximity with the worst sins. It is a gross reality and a gross thought. There is a profound contrast between the mind of Christ and that of the world. The Christian in secular society is called to bear witness to Christ's teaching in all that pertains to the sanctity of life, and to do so in the midst of opposition, ridicule, and much incomprehension. The Christian knows that some things are of absolute value, and that to attack them is intrinsically evil, whatever be the circumstances. The notion of absolute moral value is a difficult concept for the modern day, at least as applied to some spheres of human life. One result of the Enlightenment and its rationalism, reason being supreme and the arbiter of what is right, was the utilitarian system developed and propagated especially by philosophers such as Bentham and the two Mills in the 19th century Britain. Our secular society has been silently conquered by this utilitarian positivism, an outlook which looks on things and persons in terms of their usefulness for the perceived happiness of the many. It combines with a materialism which accepts as true and worthwhile only what can be empirically tested and measured. So, such persons ask, by what empirical measure can the life of a seriously handicapped infant be deemed to be useful or of value for happiness, the happiness of the barely human child and the happiness of the many? None, they say, so let it be discarded while still in the womb. This is the right and moral thing to do. This point is developed further and taken to include the tiny embryo and its stem cells. The useful thing to do for the happiness of the many is to get at and extract from the embryo those stem cells that may offer so many therapeutic possibilities and to put them to testable and empirical use. Research will benefit, and so will the health of very many sufferers, even though those microscopic embryos are destroyed in the process. This was the thinking, and I mention it here only as an instance of the rejection of the concept of absolute value in morality. Of course, the embryo is deemed not to be a human person as such. It is just a fetus, a physical component of the mother that has the potential to become a human person and does so only when independently viable. This critical importance of absolute value in morality reminds us of the gospel I read earlier from Matthew chapter 19, verse 3 to 12. Marriage itself is an absolute value. Our Lord unambiguously states that divorce, properly so called, was never the plan of God. The Christian has the benefit of the light of Christ as transmitted by the Church, enabling him to know with certainty what is of absolute value. One of the greatest needs of our culture is the appreciation of what is of true and absolute value. If this is not grasped, our culture will be in serious decay and on the road to various forms of death. The Christian in our secular and utilitarian society has a most important battle ahead of him, the propagation of Christ's doctrine. He must choose between Christ and all that is opposed to Christ and his teaching. Christ is the Lord of life and Satan is the father of death. Let us choose for Christ and work heartily for the triumph of his kingdom.